Is Saturday more exciting than Sunday, Laurence? And is that a problem that we look forward to quali more so than sometimes the actual Grand Prix on Sunday?
It is more exciting because you've got a short lap with massive potential for error and drivers absolutely on the limit in cars that are way too big for the circuit. I think Nelson Piquet used to liken it to riding a bicycle around your living room. I asked Daniel Ricciardo, like, if there's a modern version of that, and he's like, yeah, it's a bit like a dirt bike through a supermarket now, or through a shop. So yeah, it's they're really on the limit. They're coming really close to the walls, and that's what makes it so thoroughly enjoyable to watch, because it's so easy for them to make a mistake. And then there's also that factor, which we've seen a number of times over the years, is that if one driver does crash and red flag the session, then not everyone will get their laps in. So you have this decision: do you go early and make sure you get a lap, and how important it is to make sure your first run in Q3 is good, or do you wait a little bit later, hoping that the track conditions are going to be at their absolute peak, but you run the risk of somebody causing yellow flags or a red flag in front of you and you lose your go altogether. So there's all these things going on that are really not entirely unique to Monaco, but they're heightened in Monaco, so heightened by just how close the walls are. And then, it's like anything in life. You have the highs and the lows and the good bits and the bad. And by having a circuit like this, which is so exciting for qualifying, it doesn't lend itself to racing on a Sunday. Is that a problem? I don't think so whatsoever. I absolutely love Monaco. I think it thoroughly deserves its place on the calendar. I can't think of another racetrack that's come on that is as extreme as Monaco, in just its own weird, quirky way. And I don't think there ever will be again, because as Nate said, if you propose this race now, everyone would laugh at you and they'll just say, well, it's not doable. You can't get the whole F1 paddock into this little corner of the south of France. You can't have 2-meter wide cars running around a circuit, where they have to change their steering angle for one specific corner, the Fairmont hairpin, where, they don't have to have their steering set up like any other track anywhere on the calendar. But this one corner, they have to, change things to make sure they can get the lock on the steering to get around the corner. All those kind of things I think are absolutely fantastic. And look, if you get a dull race at the end of it, fine, but you don't always get a dull race. Rain has an impact on it. Safety cars have an impact on it. It's just a different way of appreciating it. So I don't think it's a problem. But I know, since I've started this job, I think the overall perception of this race has kind of, people don't like it as much as they used to. People are upset about it. People seem to think that you need to have like wheel-to-wheel racing at every Sunday in the season, forgetting the fact that actually that doesn't happen at most races anyway. But it's just because it's so unlikely to happen here that people seem to pile in on it. But as far as I'm concerned, the moment F1 stops racing in Monaco, it's going to lose something incredibly special that it will never get back.
If Max gets pole position, it'll be a record 9 poles in a row. First off, that would be an extremely impressive record to obtain. He'd also need his teammate Sergio Perez to get through qualifying without wrecking before Max can get his time in. That's an absolute stray bullet to Sergio Perez that he does not deserve. Okay. But the fact that it's at Monaco, will it make it more difficult to get pole, Nate, for Max Verstappen?
Yeah, 100%. And I think for all those factors that Laurence mentioned, a crash ahead, whether your teammate does it intentionally or not, other drivers have had to deal with that in the past, including Max. Lewis, of course, was convinced Nico Rosberg had crashed 2014 intentionally. Michael Schumacher did do it in.
Do they do that? Is that true gamesmanship? Like, is that a legit claim to make?
Yeah, I mean, most people. So, I mean, my first year in the past coming from one was 2014, and so 4 or 5 races in was Monaco that year. Rosberg, Hamilton. And then Rosberg had this weird crash down at Mirabeau, which is the kind of just before they turn right towards the hairpin. And I think most people, I mean, Laurence will be able to tell you haven't been in the paddock at the time, but I feel like most people thought it was kind of an unchecked professional foul. It was kind of because Lewis was behind him starting a lap, and that actually was a key kind of cornerstone of that rivalry developing into something a lot more toxic than it had been. And Schumacher did it in 2006. He parked up at the final chicane and actually got a penalty, which if you look back at that season, probably cost him, in the grand scheme of things, could have cost him an 8th championship. So they definitely do it. But yeah, and Max has had some moments here himself. He's crashed. I think it was 2018 was when we were like, Red Bull are going to get pole. He crashed out. Danny Rick went and won the race. So, it's doable. And a really nice quirk to it. We'll come to it in a little bit, I know, but McLaren are running a Senna livery this weekend. How amazing would it be if they kind of kept Senna's record intact by getting pole in the car, running these Senna colors that we're going to talk about, and kind of denying Max that. As a journalist, I was like, that's a cool story. So we'll see if that happens. I wanted to quickly come back to the point you asked Laurence about earlier about the circuit. Because I actually slightly disagree with Laurence about it, if that's all right. I don't want to mess up the run plan that Quinton, our
We
producer,
love
put together.
dissension.
Dissension in the ranks. So
Give us dissension.
I've always struggled with Monaco, not because I don't like the race, but I think that we've got it flipped on its head. We all know that the best part of Monaco is the Saturday. And, you can make the argument that you qualify and then you have to convert in the race. But I think Monaco is such a special occasion. Why don't we just have something different for that? And having points for qualifying or something like that, really heightening that day even further. I would love to see it, even if it's, if it's fewer points, whatever. Like, I'm sure people say that's gimmicky, etc. But there are so many Monaco Grand Prix you turn on, and you're just kind of like, okay, there's nowhere these guys can go. It was always the case, and you can get dramatic. You can get any F1 race can be dramatic with a safety car, but on individual merits with nothing else in play, it's often just cars following each other. Visually, spectacularly, there's no doubting that at all. And Laurence is completely right. If you lost Monaco, if you lost what that meant to Formula One, then I think you would lose something. But I also think it's a fair point to discuss how do we kind of make that weekend stand out. You've got so many races now. Vegas has kind of come in as this race that can now say, well, visually we've probably got one on Monaco, or in that similar level where it's not the same visuals, but it's as like, whoa, how did they get this race pulled off? And the first race we saw there was pretty good. So I don't know. I think it's a discussion to have. But qualifying, one of the laps I always go back to watch, and I would encourage anyone who wants to finish listening to this. Robert Kubica, 2010 onboards, who was driving for Renault. In fact, those cars in that era were just all amazing. But just the way those cars used to be able to take the chicanes coming into the swimming pool, you could hear like the as they came through. It's still great to watch an onboard now, but 2010 and the decade before that as well, some incredible onboards of Monaco, and that really is just that's where Monaco stands out for me. Is just that Saturday, like you said at the top of the question, Casey. Best Saturday on the calendar by far. And yeah, it's a shame, it's a shame that it's, and I use this lightly because I don't think it's what I'm meaning to say, but quote unquote, just sets the grid for the race, if that makes sense. Like it feels like a one lap kind of time trial in Monaco means more than driving your car around it for 64 laps, or I forget how many laps we have this weekend. 64 is in my head because that's what we just had, what we just had at Imola. So yeah, and again, you can say like, well, driving around that many laps in Monaco is a big challenge. It is, but if you're looking at it from the spectator point of view, less so. So I don't know. I think it's a good time to have a discussion about how does Monaco change. But ultimately, I think if you were to say there's 5 races you've got to save, I would take the hit of saying, yeah, this is a bad Sunday race, and just say this has to stay, because you can't imagine. It's like Ferrari, right? You can't imagine Formula One without Monaco. You can't imagine Formula One without Ferrari. And both could do with being improved. Both could do with, having some things changed. But fundamentally, they're still both got to be there. So I think Laurence is.
Are you following the rundown for once? Are you giving me a proper segue to a Ferrari conversation?
Yeah. Sorry, I saw the run and I was like, I've got to give Katie some rope here. So back into Ferrari, because I've just completely like run roughshod over it. And I think Laurence is going to come up, because I saw Laurence smirking at a few things I said.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, qualifying is that important, because if you start from pole, unless you get something wrong or there's something happens and then you actually get a good race, you kind of do get the 25 points right there. So by getting pole position, like you are, that is actually worth almost 25 points, as long as your car.
So then why have the race? Why have the race then?
Because things can still happen. I mean, we can say that.
But that's what I mean. I think if
every race we turned up to last year with Max, he's on pole again. Why have the race? Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we should probably just go through it. Anyway. And it did feel like that at times. But with Monaco, I feel like, that qualifying is super special. Whether you could have a different, like you could have more like single lap qualifying or something like that, or there could be a separate, one of the practice sessions could be turned into another form of earning points or whatever. Yeah, maybe. But I think actually even the practice sessions are weirdly exciting to watch, because you're just watching drivers build up and build up and build up. And, you know, you see the lap times, and this is probably the nerd in me talking, but you see the lap times come down a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then you're like, oh, how far can you push it? And you can guarantee over those 3 practice sessions and qualifying, somebody's going to crash. There's going to be an incident at some point. Now, you don't want to see a nasty crash or anything, but that's what makes it so enthralling, is that risk reward. They're kind of pushing that little bit more, and then you'll get those super slow-mos where they're so close to the barriers.
Yeah, like kissing it, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, but also, like, you know, if that's the way you feel about it, and I know a lot of people feel about it the way you do, you could just say, well, watch qualifying, except that's, you know, the end of your F1 weekend, and then don't bother watching the race if you feel it's a waste of time. But if it's a good one, you can watch like the highlights later on or something like that on ESPN.
The thing is, I'm paid. I paid to sit and watch, you know, which is a good thing to be. But I do know quite a few people that will do that. They'll watch qualifying, and then they will, if the grid is good, they will make a decision based on the grid whether they want to watch it, rather than based on, I want to watch the race. So, but actually interesting to see how, like, if viewership does drop off from Saturday to Sunday. I doubt it is huge, but
that's where I disagree. I think the minority of people would watch Saturday and then not follow up on Sunday. I think that there's not necessarily change that needs to be made, because Saturday is so exciting and because this race is so unbelievably iconic, right? It's intoxicating because so many people can't afford to go. They'll never get to go to Monaco to experience this in real life. I don't think that people shy away from watching on Sunday. I think it's one of the most watched Grand Prix of the season. I think our ratings would back that up because of all the glitz and the glam and the notoriety that comes with it. Regardless if you get a boring race or not, I think people are still watching. So I don't know, if they ever did have a massive drop-off in ratings on Sunday, then maybe I think you would consider, well, what do we do to rectify this? But as of right now, I still find, as a fan, both days to be unbelievably exciting, and I watch from start to finish.
And what I will give it is, I always talk about how Jeopardy is important for, not the game show, I love the game show, but Jeopardy to make a great race. And Monaco has that literally everywhere. So that side of it, you're absolutely right. You know, every lap, you know, to both the points that both of you have made, a driver is one slight millimeter away from changing not just their race, but also bringing out a safety car, you know, hitting another, you know, whatever it is. So I do get that point of it. It's just a shame that you get Saturday and then it's almost like a deflation of the Sunday. But maybe that's just me, and I'm happy to you know, be in the minority on that one, because hopefully more people enjoy the whole thing than don't.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.